All right, jacks. Basically the uluas and the papios. We acknowledge that, and then this is a difficult one because it's a broad group of fish. The only difference here is we added kagami to the list. It wasn't currently regulated. Because a lot of folks felt it should be part of the mix. And we had to acknowledge that there's two very distinct fisheries. There's the papio fishery, which actually targets immature species. And then there's the ulua fishery, which tends to be more of a trophy, large fish driven fishery. And so you kind of had to take that all into consideration when you thought about how best to manage these. So the 10-inch minimum size will stick, as will the 16-inch minimum size for commercial. Those are the current minimum sizes. We're proposing a no-take of omilu larger than 24 inches. So basically we're proposing a slot limit for omilu. 10-inch minimum size, 24-inch maximum size. Everything smaller than that or everything bigger than that has to be returned unharmed. And I'll talk a little bit more about omilu and what our concerns are there, but the other thing for omilu was the second line is the sports fish designation, kind of acknowledging that this, especially around Maui and Lanai, this is our papio. We don't have big estuaries like Pearl Harbor, Honolulu Harbor, etc., where you have a lot of small white uluas coming around. And so when you go papio fishing around our shoreline, it's omilu that you're generally catching. And it's a very important, recreation, culturally important fishery for people. So we wanted to protect it by making it sports fishing only, no commercial sale allowed. When commercial fishermen catch it, they'd have to release it unharmed. Other general provisions for all of these fish in the group would be a bag limit of 5 fish total, but only 2 of them bigger than 24 inches. So you could go out and you could catch 5 papio, or you could catch 3 papio and 2 ulua. We used the 24-inch as the general ulua category because that's about the size that the white ulua starts to become reproductively mature. Other than that, we acknowledge that there's a commercial, of all the jacks, the commercial harvest of papa, or the yellow spot, is the most important. Bottom fishermen from time to time will catch a fair amount of them. They're in schools offshore, not near shore at all usually when they're fishing like that. And they can get a fair amount of money for them. So we wanted to allow commercial harvest of papa to continue unlimited, given some protections, being a slot limit that we would impose on the papa for commercial things. So commercial fishermen for papa would have to fish within a 16 to 24-inch slot. Everything smaller or bigger would have to be released. And then commercial fish harvest of jacks would be allowed up to 5 fish within a 16 to 32-inch slot. So now remember, for everyone else, they can only have 2 uluas bigger than 24 inches. For the commercial fishermen, they could have up to 5 per person, but they would have to fall within that slot. Now, this came from direct discussions with commercial fishermen who tend to fish bottom fish or near shore bottom fish a lot. And they said they don't target jacks, uluas in particular, but they can sell them, and because they're fairly large, they can make a fair amount of money. So when they catch them, they like to be able to sell them. However, they cannot sell anything bigger than 30 pounds. So hence the 32-inch slot. They're trying to prevent commercial fishermen from just whacking a whole bunch of big ones offshore. We kind of felt this is important because we do have concerns about ulua, but we felt, at least within the Maui Nui complex, a large proportion of the ulua stocks are offshore in the 300 to 400 foot depth. We don't know how many, but we have some anecdotal evidence from drop cameras, bot cameras, and submarine work that there's large schools of ulua in those deeper mid-depth waters. And so yeah, you can catch these things from shore like Gary guys do, but only when they come in to feed. And if you're not out there on a boat, you're not going to be hammering them like you are some of the other species. So it's kind of why we thought, well, we could probably allow some continued harvest commercially. But the key here is, well, you know, some of the things I've written. Important nearshore recreational fish, recreational papio fishery, as well as the fishery that targets the large reproductive uluas. And then the key here is the size, structure, skew. You know, Northwestern Hawaiian Islands is our control. And it's important that we have, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, you can't compare stuff to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. You go fishing there, no matter what. But for some of this more detailed analysis on stocks, you need to have a good measure of what the fishing mortality is. So the only way you can do that is to compare it to a natural stock that's not fished. So you can see the size structure on the left of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. It's a fairly bell-shaped curve. About 20% of the population is bigger than that 24-inch, 30-centimeter size group. In the main Hawaiian Islands, everything's skewed down. So the size structure is much smaller. There's a lot less. The old data set I had like 3.5% bigger than 20 centimeters. This newer data, which has, bear in mind, this main Hawaiian Island data is from a lot of remote, rugged areas. It's done from CRED. So a lot of the Omilu sightings are actually coming in from Mihoa, you know, Niihau, Mihoa, areas like that, which are considered part of the main Hawaiian Islands, I guess. So anyway, there is a move up in the larger numbers to about 8%, I think. Yeah, 8%, bigger than 24. But still, the Omilu in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands are 10 times more abundant overall. So to kind of compare the data we have from visual, this is from the Hawaii Marine Recreational Survey, so it's actual fisheries data. And again, you can see the skew is towards the smaller size classes. 3.5% are recorded greater than 22 inches, which was the size class they used in this data set. I just, for comparison's sake, put up the visual data because one way we can tell whether or not we're on the true pattern is comparing what people are catching in that data set versus what we're sensing seeing when we're in the water. So that just makes it more, the data more likely truly representing the population because we're comparing fisheries dependent and fisheries independent sources. Okay, so this is the key that we're hinting at of why we need to do this. On the top is the main Hawaiian Islands, and we took the amount of eggs that a female produces, so divide the numbers by 2 because only half of them will be females, and then multiply the numbers in each size class by the amount of eggs they produce, and the top line is not even showing on the scale. Whereas the bottom line is in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands where you have that normal distribution, you have a lot more individuals and so forth. And the key is, even in this non-fish population where you have all of these fish, so much more, the lion's share of your reproductive output comes from the fish 24 to 31 inches. Okay, we don't even hardly have those here. So it's just a big sign of concern, especially if you're going to continue to allow papio fishing for undersized. So you're targeting the small ones. You need to find some balance to help make sure you maintain the reproductive output. Now this is the results of this kind of fisheries. It's not a full stock assessment, but when you have enough data on a fish like the Omilu, they know that from otolith work, they know the growth rates. They can come up with some of these fisheries parameters. You can measure by comparing Northwesterns with mains. You can measure fishing mortality. And you can punch all these things in. You can come up with an assessment of maximum sustainable yield kind of assessment. If you're fishing more, so there's more fishing effort than the fishery can support, it's called overfishing. If you fish the biomass down below the point that it can sustain itself, it's called overfished. when you do both of those, which is the case with the analysis of the Omilu, you know, you're in a pretty sorry state of affairs. If the federal government was managing this fishery, there would be a rebuilding period, which, you know, would be fairly extensive. They could shut it down completely. They could implement all kinds of different types of limits and restrictions and, you know, evaluations. This is the kind of assessment they've done on the deep sea bottomfish fishery. And with that fishery, all of these total allowable catches and everything that they're implementing was because overfishing was believed to be occurring, but the fishery was not overfished yet. So this is kind of an important distinction. And again, this analysis is being redone with a much bigger data set right now. So I should, you know, in the next month anyway, I probably will have even a much more accurate assessment of that. The other thing to point out, we don't know a whole lot about larval transport and whatnot, but from the more recent genetic work that's been done, there's fairly strong evidence that there's clear breaks. You know, the Awanui Haha is a fairly substantial break between the Big Island and Maui. And Maui, including all the way through Lanai and Molokai, and then it breaks kind of in the, you know, the channel, the Molokai channel, and then Oahu to Kauai are like three distinct groups. So, you know, we do need to think about our fish locally, because this is where they're coming from. We're not going to get fish from Oahu or fish from the Big Island in so sizable numbers. It appears, anyway, from the genetic work. And this, you know, this argues for this kind of more localized regulations.